Bucs move to first place, in part
Crown them.
because the Minnesota Vikings get the win over the Atlanta Falcons. It's 42-21. Vikings move to 11-2, their sixth straight win. Falcons fall to 6-7 into second place in the NFC South. Sam Darnold is going to be the story this week, man. 22 of 28 for 347, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Passer rating of 157.9, was also sacked 4 times. And you got over 130 yards from both Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. 3 receiving touchdowns from Jordan Addison, 2 from Jefferson. Monster game for the Vikings.
12.4 yards per attempt for Sam Darnold. It's just like that's
average depth of target of 13.
Yeah.
I mean, he was chucking. It was up at 16 well into the fourth quarter. He was chucking it down the field. Lots to talk about in this game. What are your initial thoughts here?
According to PFF, an adjusted completion rate of 88% for Sam Darnold.
Man, he's on a run. He was outstanding. And the Falcons had a bye a couple weeks ago. Last week they sacked Justin Herbert 5 times. That was an unexpected development. The Falcons have had an awful pass rush. They were getting home again, or at least getting pressure again, and they did sack Darnold 4 times in this one. They were getting pressure.
Their pass rush. They've discovered a pass rush. I mean, the last couple of weeks, basically.
Kind of.
By far the worst pass rushing team in the NFL has all of a sudden been able to pressure and sack a couple of good quarterbacks in good offenses that, okay, they've got some concerns maybe on the offensive line or some weaknesses. But like Arnold Ebiketie just ran around Brian O'Neill as one of the best right tackles in the game. Caden Ellis was causing all kinds of problems for them. They've stumbled on a pass rush in the last couple of weeks.
Darnold ends up, though, let's see what this official was, went under pressure yesterday.
Yeah.
5 of 8 for 173 and 4 sacks. So it wasn't a high volume. I mean, he didn't drop back a ton. It wasn't a high volume of pressure, but way higher than what the Falcons had been bringing to the table.
Right.
But he goes 5 for 8 for 173, and 3 of those 5 touchdowns, including that scramble drill to Justin Jefferson, where D. Alford, man, got
I don't know what he was doing on that
low
play.
light of lowlights on that play. And again, Darnold sacked 4 times. The other development earlier in the second quarter, just what a turn of events on a handful of plays. Ebiketie almost has a strip sack of Darnold. One of those, he gets his hand on the ball,
Yep.
and it was just like slow-mo. Was it a fumble? Was the hand going forward? They rule it incomplete. Then the Vikings kick a field goal. But there's a penalty on the Falcons. Minnesota gets the ball back, and then Darnold throws a touchdown to Justin Jefferson. That was a huge turn of events because it goes from could be Falcons' ball on the strip sack to the Vikings kick 3 to the Vikings get a touchdown. So a huge swing just on that play, which was just like inches away from a strip sack for the Falcons.
That's generally a really interesting play for a variety of reasons. One of them is it was a great example of how pass rushing is kind of done as a team as opposed to just one guy trying to win his guy. Like, again, Ebiketie was giving Brian O'Neill some problems coming around that edge. He was the guy that gets his hand to the fumble versus incompletion. But the reason that Darnold was like trapped at that point in the pocket because Caden Ellis has rocked back Garrett Bradbury and has collapsed the pocket from the inside, right? So there would be another play where the exact same pass rush from Ebiketie versus Brian O'Neill is nothing. And Brian O'Neill just, shepherds him by the quarterback. The quarterback takes a half step forward and it's nothing. It's just a little, close, but he gets washed straight by the quarterback, and we're not even factoring in that pass rush. But because Caden Ellis has wrecked Garrett Bradbury, and Garrett Bradbury has given up all this ground, all of a sudden Darnold's now trapped there. He can't step up, and Ebiketie's arm is able to get out there, influence the play, and kill it, but also almost turn into a fumble and a massive play by the defense. It's so interesting how these things are related, and yet we always try and treat everything like isolated one-on-one incidents. It's always interconnected.
I think that's what we were always trying to describe with Aiden Hutchinson, where it felt like he was the only one getting pressure. And it's like, well, the quarterback sidestepped him, and no one else was near him. The Lions have been better with that this year at least, but that was what we were describing quite a bit. So it's 21-21 into the fourth quarter. Vikings go up a score. Falcons fumble the ensuing kickoff.
Not great.
Not great. And then the Vikings go up 2 scores and then run away with it. So they go 21 straight in the fourth quarter to get the win.
I found it quite funny that, we've been the narrative, the discourse around Kirk Cousins this season has been insane. Week 1, week 2, it's like, this is an embarrassment. This is non-functional. Cousins should be sitting on a couch. This is a joke, right? This offense, like, everyone needs to be fired. This is a train wreck. It's blow it all up. And then Cousins, throwing 500 yards, looked great, goes on a great run. Like, genius. It's perfect. They fixed it. Zach Robinson, head coach. Like, this is amazing. And then Cousins has a terrible game. It's like, well, we're back to blow it up again. This is a joke. Put in the rookie. What are we doing here? That all happened within this game. Like, that's been the season.
He's coming off a 4-interception game.
Yes.
Throws another awful
Correct.
pick in the first half. And so I was checking out the blitz stats, right? So his 2 picks came against the blitz, right? But the first one, the Falcons pick up a 6-man pressure, and he's got a pristine pocket, and he just throws it right to Josh Metellus for the interception.
It's just a terrible decision.
Just a terrible read. Second one was on he was hurried and he overthrows it. Byron Murphy makes a great one-handed pick, but the first one was just terrible.
Yeah.
And I know the stats. No passing touchdowns in his last 4 games since week whatever with against the Cowboys, and 8 interceptions. I know the stat with Cousins, but it's weird. Like, he was good outside of the 2 picks.
Well, that's the thing. So it's like, so you look at that and you're like, okay, 2 terrible decisions. Well, obviously the blitz was getting to him. Brian Flores wins. Cousins can't deal with it. But overall, against the blitz in this game, he averaged 9.1 yards per attempt, had an adjusted completion rate of 89%, and put up over 200 yards. It's like, there was a lot of good against the blitz. Like, he had one of those games we were swinging play to play with the narrative on Cousins, right? The season we've been going, embarrassment, oh, this is great, embarrassment. Within this game, people were doing that. It was like, oh, look at that, there's a dime from Cousins, and then, oh, that's a joke, that's abysmal, get him out of there. Put in Michael Penix, what are we doing here? I don't understand, why we can't just accept that there's some volatility at this point.
If the Falcons weren't so bad defensively, and the fumbled kickoff, of course, and the turnovers mattered with Cousins. It was another game where I thought their first game in a while where all the offensive weapons looked good. Darnell Mooney with over 140 yards on 6 catches. So he's creating explosives. They found Ray McLeod a ton. Drake London had 70 yards through the air. A little contested possession controversy over the middle, but he ends up getting the catch there. Bijan with his normal super smooth zone running with a long of 13 yards. I still wish he would just break off a 40 or 50 yarder one time, but he looks so smooth doing it. Tyler Algier averaged 7 yards a pop and a maul for a maul touchdown. This was all their playmakers kind of cooking, but it only ended up in 21 points because of the turnovers and then losing that fourth quarter possession as well.
But also 21 points against the Brian Flores defense is not necessarily bad going. This is, again, it just feels like people are unable to have a sensible conversation about Kirk Cousins and the Falcons offense this season. It's been lurching game to game with wild, extreme takes and not able to plot a course in the middle. And then within this game, we were doing exactly the same thing. We were just lurching from extreme take to extreme take. I saw somebody, remember there was a ridiculous play, it might have been the contested catch thing, where people were like, can you be benched after a completion? What are we doing? Cousins did not play within this game terribly, but did make a couple of bad mistakes, right? And this Brian Flores defense causes volatility from quarterbacks because it is so chaotic and difficult to diagnose. We can have a sensible conversation with Cousins without each next play determining whether he's getting benched or going to the Hall of Fame.
I mean, it's 4 straight losses.
Yeah.
Scored 17 points against the Saints, 6 against the Broncos, 13 against the Chargers, 4 picks.
Yes.
21 against the Vikings. That's why, I mean, it's added up.
Yeah, I mean, he was horrendous last week. But, this has not been one consistent thing every week. It has been volatile. It changes week to week. It's a different outcome. It's a different level of performance on a given base. It's just such a dumb discourse consistently. I'm amazed by the smart people falling into dumb discourse.
Well, let me ask you this. If there was an announcement this week that Michael Penix Jr. was getting the start over Kirk Cousins, would you be surprised?
Yes.
I'm creeping into less surprise territory.
I would be surprised, and I would not be convinced that it would be a positive step for the Falcons.
I don't know. I think we could see it. I think we could see it within the next week or two.
For the Vikings, so obviously...
No inside info on that, by the way.
Right. For the Vikings, number one, I think Sam Darnold is putting himself in an MVP discussion. Whatever I think about the MVP award. That was a phenomenal performance by him. We're way past the point of debating, is he going to stay good for the rest of the season? And now, in this world where, the best quarterback performance this year, I think, has been Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is probably not really in the MVP discussion simply because the Bengals as a team stink. So if you're essentially saying he's excluded from this discussion, now you're into a bunch of quarterbacks who don't have as strong a case. And, Lamar has lost a couple of games recently. Josh Allen is off.
Allen's MVP candidacy did not take a hit yesterday.
No, in fact, if anything, it was galvanized in a weird contradiction of MVP discourse. But anyway, it's Josh Allen, whose numbers aren't as good as general MVP candidates tend to be. Jared Goff. It's a bunch of quarterbacks whose candidacy is not like lights out guaranteed. He's the obvious MVP, at which point Darnold's probably putting himself in the mix now.
Yeah, he is. Outstanding from him. And I'm going to say this, again, not to take away from Sam Darnold, but the Vikings look like they've got the best pass catchers in the NFL.
Yes.
I mean, Justin Jefferson, finally finds the end zone, but he's always Justin Jefferson. He is outstanding. Defenses have to account for him. And then Jordan Addison, what I was most impressed with him last year was just some of the nuance that he brings to the position. You see receivers who don't do things well, which is being QB friendly, the way they attack the ball, the way they track the ball, whatever it might be. Other receivers in last year's draft class, like a Quentin Johnston with the Chargers, you see a lot of those negative plays where it's just leaving plays on the table. Addison seems to be the opposite. And so he's become a high-end number 2 to the point where if he was a 1, would you question it that much? I don't know. But a high-end number 2 to go with a top 3 receiver in the NFL and Justin Jefferson. And then since TJ Hawkinson's come back, pushing Josh Oliver down the depth chart, you have an outstanding tight end 1 as well. So I think the Vikings have the best pass catchers. And then when you look at the way they've schemed it up in the red zone, used the Jalen Naylors of the world, the Josh Olivers of the world, the backup tight end, Aaron Jones out of the backfield, incredible passing attack and weapons. Darnold's running the show, and I love how aggressive they are. They have been attacking down the field. So sometimes you have these great receiving cores, and you're like, where are the explosive plays? Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings are saying, we know what we have, and we're going to attack down the field and put so much strain on the defense with these explosive plays, and that's exactly what this Minnesota passing attack's been doing.
Yeah, Jordan Addison is just so good. Obviously, everyone has whiffs and successes in the draft, particularly at wide receiver. I've had some terrible misses. Jonathan Mingo looks useless as a wide receiver in multiple places now. Jordan Addison as my wide receiver 1, though, I feel pretty good about, despite a lot of concerning red flags for him coming out. Size, 175 pounds at 6 foot, ran slowly. The measurables weren't good. A lot of reasons to be quite concerned about Jordan Addison, but you watch his tape and it's like he's just so good. He's plays faster than he is. He plays stronger than he is size-wise. He's just a really good wide receiver. And now you put him in an offense where Justin Jefferson takes so much of the attention, like the way T. Higgins benefits from Jamar Chase. It's such a great situation for him. And the Vikings are now in this situation where they have an amazing duo, not just one superstar wide receiver who, takes a ton of attention and it affects the game every play, but you've got the guy that can take advantage of it. You've got the Alex Highsmith to Pittsburgh's TJ Watt, right? You've got the guy who can take advantage of that one-on-one and cook at the same time as the guy who's taking all the double teams.
Shout out to Vikings fans listening here. NFL Spotlight, Ari Mayrov from the 33rd team. They're going to have Vikings DB coach Durante Jones on NFL Spotlight this week, so check that out. If you are a Vikings fan or not a Vikings fan, check it out either way. Ari's had some fantastic guests on this year on NFL Spotlight. Check that out. And, wherever you listen to your podcast.
By the way, Cousins also got booed hard coming into this game by the Vikings crowd, which felt kind of harsh. I mean,
what did he do?
Just left them, I assume, was the problem. But
Revenge game.
You look at, I mean, okay, Cousins there's something of a mercenary tint to Cousins' career when you think about the way he's been a very astute businessman in addition to whatever he's been as a quarterback. But you would be hard-pressed to look at what he did in Minnesota as anything other than overachieving relative to expectation when they signed him, right? Like, he played really well. He played better than we had seen before from him by the time he got to Minnesota for basically the entirety of his career there, and improved when Kevin O'Connell arrived. And okay, he never got them over the line, and you can sort of hold him up as, almost an example of the flaws in paying a mediocre or a good quarterback a ton of money, and you sort of get capped or trapped at this level.
Yeah, he did well in Minnesota.
But Cousins, it's harsh to take that out personally on Cousins and, relentlessly boo the dude just because he decided that he was worth more money than you were willing to pay him.
Not for this show here, but we should have a discussion around what we've seen now from Kevin O'Connell in 3 years. Because to your point, he got the best out of Kirk Cousins. Maybe not statistically, but definitely from a wins and losses perspective. He's now gotten the best out of Sam Darnold. They had that run last year where he was making do with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs just picking up the playbook in a week and all of that. So Kevin O'Connell winning 65, about 2/3 of his games in 3 years here. There's not a whole lot of offensive guru tags that we've thrown around other than a Shanahan friend and Ben Johnson over these last couple of years. But O'Connell's creeping into that territory. And then the other piece of this discussion, again, not for today, but we should discuss, is Sam Darnold the future in Minnesota, despite the J.J. McCarthy draft pick last year?
There was a report before the game that came out that said the Vikings have not even opened discussions with Darnold in terms of an extension or a future contract or whatever.
I would wait too. I mean, they're going to play. Look, if he,
you're running out of time at some stage. Like, if you are interested in that as a future prospect,
I guess the risk there is he has this epic game against the Lions later in the year, and they go and they win the division, they get the number 1 seed, and he is actually in the MVP race, and he's maybe the best bridge quarterback in NFL history. Think about that. This was whatever he's making, the $10 million 1 year flyer. We know we're going to draft somebody, but we need somebody to start, right? It's kind of what the Bucs did with Baker Mayfield last year, but they rolled with Baker. This was a bridge quarterback situation. We're going to draft somebody. We know we're going to draft somebody, but we at least need a starter just in case, or we need a bridge guy. And all of a sudden, bridge guys leading them to 11-2 right now. It's one of the best, if not the best. Give me in the chat any historians here.
Well,
any other bridge quarterback that's had a better season than Sam Darnold?
Yeah, at some point he's playing so well that it becomes a big decision not to re-sign him, right? We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. We're now talking about, is he putting himself in the MVP discussion? Genuinely, there doesn't need to be that much more happen for Minnesota for the Vikings would be under a ton of pressure if they didn't give Darnold a big contract and said, okay, we know J.J. McCarthy is the future and the plan, but the plan had to change. The guy that we brought in as just the stopgap won MVP and took us to a Super Bowl, right? If that kind of thing happened, which is on the cards, Minnesota could easily go on a run, knock off one of these teams, Detroit, Philadelphia, get to an NFC championship game, win a game, get to the Super Bowl. Who knows if they win or lose? But for a team where they are right now, it's within the realms of possibility that this guy who's putting himself in the MVP discussion continues at this pace. They knock off a team or two, and suddenly they're in a championship game or a Super Bowl, and you haven't even talked to him about an extension at that stage.
Could tag him for a year. They've cleaned out the books, though, right? They got all the Cousins money off the books and everything. They can make this decision, and then at worst, you sign Darnold, and then J.J. McCarthy he's an inexpensive backup with first round upside. It's not, or you do 1 more year of Darnold, one more prove it year for Darnold again, and McCarthy takes over in year 3. It's probably a good situation to be in. Down the stretch is going to determine all of that, though. We got the Bears next week for the Vikings, and then they're at Seattle, at first place Seattle.
Right.
and then home against the Packers, and then at Detroit. Those last 3 games, and of course, the playoffs as well for Darnold. Anything else on this game?
No, other than it was an interesting game for Minnesota because it's the first game in a while where it was actually so they've had this run where they've blown teams out early and then somehow conspired to let the game get really close and then snuck over the line. This one was one where it was actually close for most of the game, and then they went away late in the end and made it look like it was a much more conclusive victory than it was. So I don't know if that means anything, but that's probably a nicer way of doing it for them. It's like, get comfort at the end as opposed to in the first quarter.
It's also, I think I said it in the preview show, if you just looked at the stats, you would say Brian Flores' defense is bend but don't break. Like, they gave up a lot of yards.
Yeah.
All the Falcons receivers got theirs. They ran the ball. Falcons ran the ball well, and you only give up 21 points. It essentially functions as a bend but don't break result.
Right.
But with volatility mixed in there, the turnovers, and again, forcing Cousins into some unforced errors.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.